It was a bright afternoon inside the huge mansion, the kind of place most people only see in magazines. The large windows let in soft sunlight that danced across the polished floors. Expensive paintings lined the walls, and every corner looked carefully arranged, as if nothing in the house was allowed to be out of place, not even a tiny speck of dust. The millionaire and his wife were hosting a gathering that day, and guests filled the wide living hall with soft laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations about business and travel. In the middle of all this, the maid moved quickly and quietly, almost invisible. She had been working in the house for years, always keeping her head down, always careful not to disturb anyone. Today was different for her, though. She had brought her young son with her, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. She couldn't find anyone to watch him. Her neighbor, who usually helped, had an emergency. She couldn't risk losing her job by staying home, so she did the only thing she could. She brought her son along and prayed. He wouldn't cause trouble. The boy stayed close to her at all times. His footsteps were small and light, almost as if he was scared to step too loudly. His mother had told him many times on the way, "Stay with me, don't wander, don't touch anything." He understood. He wasn't the kind of child who liked to run around or disturb others anyway. But he did love one thing, especially the piano. As he stood near his mother, helping her carry small items when he could, his eyes kept drifting to the large grand piano placed in the corner of the hall. It was impossible to miss. It looked shiny and perfect, as if it had never been touched. The polished black surface reflected the chandelier hanging above it. The keys, neatly lined in white and black, seemed to call out to him like a secret invitation. He kept glancing at it, then looking away, afraid someone might notice him staring. Unfortunately for him, someone did notice. A group of well-dressed guests were standing nearby. One of them whispered, "Is that the maid's son?" Another replied, "Yes. Strange that she brought him here." They didn't say it loudly, but loud enough for others to hear. The millionaire's wife, who had a habit of noticing everything that didn't fit her idea of perfection, turned her head and saw the child. She raised an eyebrow. "Why is he here?" she asked in a tone that wasn't exactly angry, but definitely not kind. The maid froze for a second, her heart quickening. She bowed her head respectfully and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I had no one to leave him with today. He will not disturb anyone." The millionaire's wife looked at the child again, then shrugged slightly. "Just make sure he doesn't touch anything. This is not a playground." The boy lowered his head, feeling embarrassed even though he had done nothing wrong. But then, one of the guests tried to lighten the mood. He smiled and said, "Actually, I've heard the boy has a talent for music. Piano, I think." The child's mother stiffened. She wished the guest had not said that. She knew how powerful people in this mansion reacted to things like that, usually with disbelief or mockery. The millionaire's wife let out a short laugh. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a laugh that said she didn't take the comment seriously at all. She said, pointing slightly toward the boy, "He can play this piano." The guest chuckled, but kindly. "That's what I heard. His schoolteacher mentioned it." The millionaire's wife looked at the grand piano again, then at the child. "Really now? Well, if he can play so well, why not let us see?" The maid's heart sank. "Ma'am," but the wife cut her off. No. If he's truly gifted, then show us." She turned to the boy and said in a teasing voice, "Come on then. Prove it." The words felt sharp, even though she said them with a smile. They weren't meant to encourage him. They were meant to challenge him almost, as if she expected him to run away in fear. Everyone turned to look at the child now. Some looked amused, some curious, some doubtful. The boy felt every pair of eyes on him, and for a moment he froze completely. His small hands trembled, and he moved closer to his mother. The maid bent down and whispered softly, "You don't have to do it if you don't want to." She didn't want him to be embarrassed. She didn't want him to feel like a spectacle. She just wanted to finish her work and leave quietly. But the boy looked at the piano again. Deep inside, he loved music more than he feared being judged. And something about the way the millionaire's wife said "prove it" made him feel a spark, like he wanted to show that he was more than what they assumed. Slowly, he stepped away from his mother. His small feet made almost no sound as he walked across the marble floor. Everyone watched in silence, expecting him to get scared and back out. The millionaire's wife folded her arms, waiting with a smirk, as if she already knew how this would end. But the boy kept walking. He reached the grand piano and stood before it. Up close, it looked even bigger than he imagined. The lid was open slightly, showing the golden strings inside. He gently touched the smooth surface with his fingertips, almost afraid to leave fingerprints on it. The maid watched nervously from the corner, her hands shaking more than her son's. The guests whispered among themselves, "Is he really going to try? He looks so small. How can he even reach the pedals? Maybe he'll just tap a few notes and run." The boy took a deep breath. Then, very slowly, he pulled out the bench. It made a soft, scraping sound that echoed lightly in the room. He sat down carefully, making sure he wasn't too far or too close. He placed his fingers on the keys, but didn't press yet. He simply felt the cool surface of the keys under his hands. The room became unusually still. Even the background music playing from the speakers seemed too loud now. The millionaire's wife watched with amused curiosity. She leaned forward slightly and said, "Well, go on." The boy closed his eyes for a second. He remembered the old keyboard his mother had bought from a second-hand shop long ago. He remembered practicing every night, quietly, without disturbing the neighbors. He remembered how music made him feel free. Even when life was hard, he opened his eyes again. Then he pressed the first key. A soft note floated into the air, clear, bright, and surprisingly confident. The guests stopped whispering. The millionaire's wife blinked, slightly surprised by the clarity of the sound. The boy pressed another key, then another. The melody began to form, gentle and slow, as if he were telling a story with the music. His hands moved carefully but smoothly across the keys. The maid held her breath. She couldn't believe her son had the courage to play in front of so many people. The guests moved closer, curious now. Some even took a few silent steps toward the piano, trying to see his small fingers moving. The millionaire's wife stopped smirking. She tilted her head slightly, paying closer attention. The boy continued playing, completely lost in the moment, unaware of the eyes on him. And that was how the unexpected performance in the grand mansion began. The room grew so quiet that even the soft hum of the air conditioner became noticeable. Everyone stood still, watching the boy's small hands move across the wide piano keys. At first, he played slowly, almost as if he was testing the piano, checking how it responded to his touch. But after a few seconds, something magical happened. His fingers began to move with confidence. The hesitant notes turned into a smooth melody that floated around the room like a gentle breeze. Nobody expected it. Not the guests, not the millionaire's wife, not even the boy's mother, who stood near the wall with her hands clasped together, her heart beating fast. The boy seemed to forget where he was. He forgot he was surrounded by wealthy strangers. He forgot about their judgmental looks. He even forgot about the challenge thrown at him with the words, "Prove it." For him, the world at that moment was just the piano and the music he had carried inside him for years. Every note he played came from somewhere deep within a quiet passion he never showed to anyone except his mother. Slowly, the expressions of the guests began to change. At first, they watched out of curiosity, expecting nothing impressive. But now, their faces softened. Their eyebrows lifted. Their mouths parted slightly. One guest whispered, barely audible, This is actually beautiful." Another nodded, leaning closer to hear better. "Is he really playing this?" A child his age. Even the millionaire's wife, who had been so confident in her disbelief, leaned forward in her seat. Her eyes fixed on the boy. Her smirk was gone. Her expression had shifted to something else, something that looked like surprise mixed with confusion. She had seen many children try to impress adults before, but she had never seen one who played as if the music flowed through him naturally. The melody the boy played was soft, but full of emotion. It wasn't loud or showy. It didn't try to be dramatic. It was warm, gentle, and easy to listen to, almost like a story being told through sound. With every note, the atmosphere in the mansion changed. The laughter that had filled the room earlier slowly faded. The clinking of glasses stopped. Even small conversations died down on their own. People simply listened. For the first time in that big, fancy room, the boy wasn't invisible. He wasn't the maid's son. He wasn't someone who didn't belong. He was someone who could touch hearts without speaking a word. The maid felt tears gather in her eyes. She tried to blink them away, not wanting anyone to notice. She had always believed in her son. She had always seen something special in him when he played the old keyboard at home. But seeing him play here, in a place where people didn't expect anything from him, this was different. She felt proud in a way she couldn't put into words. One of the guests near the piano leaned over to another and whispered, "Do you think he's trained professionally?" The other man shook his head. "I doubt it. Look at his posture. He plays naturally, not like someone who spent years in a music academy. But the feeling, that's real," another lady added softly. "Many trained musicians can hit the right notes, but they can't make you feel anything. This boy, he's doing something rare." As the boy reached the middle of his performance, the melody grew slightly stronger, not louder, but richer. His hands moved faster, flowing across the keys with surprising ease. It was as if the piano had been waiting for someone like him, someone who wasn't afraid to let his heart guide his fingers. The millionaire's wife felt something. She didn't feel often. She felt speechless. Her friends glanced at her from time to time, trying to read her expression. They knew her well. They knew she loved being in control of every situation. But right now, the situation had slipped out of her hands. The boy she had teased, the boy she expected to fumble and fail, was now the center of attention more than she had ever been at her own gatherings. She tried to hide her discomfort by sipping her drink, but her hand shook slightly. She placed the glass down quickly to avoid making a sound. The boy continued playing. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. His world was the melody. His face remained calm, but his eyes reflected something deep, something honest. After a few minutes, he reached the final part of the tune. The notes became softer again, like a gentle farewell. The room grew even quieter, if that was possible. No one shifted. No one spoke. Everyone simply listened as the last note lingered in the air for a moment before slowly fading away. When the melody ended, silence took over. Not an uncomfortable silence, not an awkward silence, but a silence that felt heavy with emotion. The boy lifted his hands from the keys and placed them on his lap. He took a small breath and looked down, unsure if he had done well or not. He didn't dare look up at the faces watching him. His mother finally exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath for the last few seconds. The millionaire's wife stared at the boy. Her face held no smile, no smirk, nothing but astonishment. She opened her mouth slightly, then closed it again, as if she didn't know what to say. For a few long seconds, the room remained frozen. Then, suddenly one person started applauding, then another, and within moments, the entire hall erupted in applause. It wasn't a light, polite clap like people sometimes give out of courtesy. It was loud, heartfelt, and full of genuine admiration. Some people even stood up. The boy looked around, confused at first. Then his face softened in relief. He didn't smile widely, he was too shy for that. But his eyes glowed a little. The maid covered her mouth with both hands, trying not to cry openly. She felt her chest fill with pride. She had always known her son had something special, but she never imagined a room full of wealthy strangers would see it too. A few guests approached the piano, praising him. That was incredible. You have a gift. Where did you learn to play like that? The boy looked overwhelmed. He stayed quiet, answering softly only when someone waited patiently. He didn't boast. He didn't act proud. He simply said the truth. He learned by listening, practicing on an old keyboard, and teaching himself little by little. Meanwhile, the millionaire's wife stood still, feeling more embarrassed by the minute. She hadn't meant to be cruel earlier. She had only been amused by the idea of a maid's child having a talent. But now she realized how wrong she had been. The boy had not only proved himself, he had silenced the entire mansion. Someone whispered to her, "You should see if he wants lessons. This kind of talent shouldn't go to waste." But she couldn't respond. She wasn't used to being humbled. She wasn't used to being wrong. And she definitely wasn't used to seeing someone she underestimated shine in a way. She never could. The maid went to her son and held his shoulders gently. "You did so well," she whispered. Her voice shook with emotion. He nodded quietly, still shy, still humble as they walked toward the door to leave. Many guests smiled at them warmly. The boy walked beside his mother, still holding the gentle confidence. The piano had given him. He entered the mansion as just the maid's son. He left it as someone extraordinary, someone who made the whole room fall, silent with nothing more than a melody from the heart.